Whitney Bruice, and I'm an MFT.
And I'm Amy Jamieson, and I am a faculty member and the chair of the Exercise and Sport Studies department.
So we are doing this webinar in collaboration. I'll go back a little bit. And on campus, what my role is working with students and mostly doing therapy in individuals and groups, as well as doing presentations. And I work in the Alcohol and Drug Program as a behavioral health therapist.
And I teach courses at UC Santa Barbara in health, and so I'm hoping that many of my nutrition students are joining us today, because we will be covering and reviewing some of the basic nutrition information that will connect up with our behavior modification and goal setting theme. So welcome, everybody.
All right, so we'll go over the purpose and objectives. All right, so the purpose here is to reinforce the concept of self-care. We're going to give you lots of information on how to set and reach your goals. We want to give you some motivation to follow through, and also give you tips on how to support someone else with their goals.
And then the objectives are to kind of introduce and learn how to create and set SMART goals, and I'll explain what the SMART stands for. We're also going to introduce the concept strategy of motivational interviewing, and we'll do a little demonstration so you can see how that works. And then what we're also going to include is behavior change plan, and that'll be really based on the goal that you identify and you begin to plan and prepare. And then of course, we'll give you a list of resources on campus and in the community that you can tap into if you have additional questions or need some additional support at any point.
All right, so this concept of self-care, if anybody's out there watching live, we'd love it if you could just put in the chat how you define self-care or what you incorporate into your lifestyle as self-care. And often when we ask students what their goals are, they reply that they want to focus on improving themselves. And sometimes they can be a little vague, but what they really, talk about when they're asked a little more specifically is academically they want to improve, emotionally, physically, and self-care can really be different for different people. So often it does include stress relief. It's a huge part. Sleep, social connection, physical activity, spirituality, and even financial stability. And there's some research on self-care. The number one thing here is that it requires you to be able to, see yourself and see what you might be missing, and awareness of like what you're doing. It also involves taking responsibility for, your own needs. Also influenced by attitudes of others. Who you surround yourself by definitely influences how you take care of yourself. And then there's shifts. So there's different events that happen in people's lives that really shifts how they take care of themselves. Cultural considerations. It's really important to kind of look at how there might be different, values here for different people. So for example, some subcultures, they don't think it's appropriate to seek help from other people. They might not think that's okay. And also sometimes taking care of other people might be a higher value than taking care of themselves. So keeping that in mind. People with mental or physical diagnoses, they will be more resilient if they find there to be a meaning behind their diagnosis, and they can reframe the implications, so what's happening to them. A lot of times self-care can be abandoned when people are overwhelmed by symptoms, disability, or they feel unsupported. So like some of the things that have been happening in our country over the past year or so have been really shaking people up. And sometimes people, you'll notice that they will, wear the same thing that they wore yesterday. They're not taking showers because they don't have to go into work, things like that. So just pointing out some of those. All right, so we're going to
launch. I want to just kind of thank everybody before we do the poll. I want to thank everybody for there are wonderful comments in the chat, and just to kind of share some of the more common things that I saw. I mean, things like really taking time to be introspective. So the meditation and the journaling were repetitive comments that I saw. And those are really great strategies in taking that time and doing that reflection. And the nice thing, and we'll talk about journaling later on, is, once you write something down, it gives you the opportunity to go back and look at, wow, how was I feeling in 2020, right? And kind of take a look and see how maybe you've progressed in either goals or just kind of in your life flow overall. The other thing I saw was a lot of yoga, which is great because it does incorporate the fitness and physical piece as well as the spiritual and mental piece. And then outside, I saw that as a theme. And so for us in Santa Barbara in Southern California, we're very fortunate right now that we have climate and the weather that we can get outside pretty much twice out of the year. And I think it's great that we can take advantage of that. So just to kind of let you guys know what those chat comments were, and I really appreciate all of your input. Thank you, everybody. So I'll let Whitney move forward with our poll.
Yeah, thank you. I think because I'm screen sharing, I can't see the chat come in.
They're still coming in, so keep it coming.
Cool. All right. So the poll, this is, some of the things that people typically will list are kind of here on the left here, but go ahead and put in this poll. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about or using screens or planning to use them? Do you feel urges to use screens more and more increasingly? Okay, here we go. Academics, number 1, looks like. Okay, cool. Nobody's worried about substance use. Okay. Relationships, meditation, fitness, weight management. Okay, great.
Great.
Well,
we'll be talking about some topics, so that'll be wonderful.
Okay, so moving on here. Okay, this is a basic about how to help a friend, and we work with our students on this in all of our counseling groups that we do, but I'm just going to go over these points briefly because it can really help with any relationship you are in and that you're noticing something going on. So when you do want to have that conversation with someone about something that you're noticing that you're worried about that they're doing, finding the right time and place and inviting them into the conversation is really key. So for example, hey, I noticed something I'm worried about. Do you have a minute to talk about it? You really want that person to be like curious about what this might be. So you're coming from a place of care and concern and you're not being judgy. You're pointing out the facts. I noticed you've been skipping class, for example. And it's more like you're not putting an emotional judgment on that. It's more just what you've noticed. Say how you feel with I statements. I'm worried you might not pass that class. Just very direct. Ask how they feel and listen to what they have to say and validate their feelings. So they might say, I'm just too tired in the morning after, going out late at night. And you can just say like, wow, so it must be really hard to, have a lot of energy in the morning when you haven't had enough sleep. Somebody might be like, everything's fine. Nothing to see here. And that's a really typical response. So you have to kind of roll with that kind of resistance if somebody is like denying that they might have a problem with something. But if they're like, gosh, I really should get to bed earlier, then you can say, well, great. What are your ideas as far as how to get up earlier? And just encourage anything that they say about, changing that, and offer support. Hey, maybe I'll set an alarm in the evening so you can remember it's time to wind down and go to bed, and then refer for other support. So they might need like some kind of coaching or some kind of counseling to help them kind of stay on top of that goal more formally. And then following up. So asking them maybe the next day or the next week, hey, how are you doing with that change you wanted to make? So they know that you care and that you're still looking at it. So I did want to talk about this habit book that I read, and it was really inspiring. It's called The Power of Habit, and it's by Charles Duhigg, and he describes these behavior loops and how strong they really can be. So this diagram here shows that there's a cue, a routine ensues, and then there's a reward afterwards. So the research shows that there's a part of the brain called the basal ganglia that takes over and it leads you through these habitual behaviors. And it actually gives other parts of the brain a break so that you're just kind of on this autopilot. So for example, driving a car, it takes so many steps to drive a car, but if you've done it 100 times, you might end up at work and you're like, oh, I don't even remember driving there today. It's because, you're just on autopilot. Your brain just kind of takes over and does what it knows how to do.
So there's another researcher and actually Professor Nathan Azrin, who did a lot of research on this behavior modification. And he states, once you are aware of how your habit works, so once you recognize the cues and the rewards, you're already halfway to changing it. So it kind of reveals that it's that awareness piece and being able to recognize not just the cue, but the habit and the reward, right? So the whole kind of circle that we looked at. And that's your first major step to making what we would like to be a permanent behavior change.
Exactly. All right, so getting rid of habits you don't want and starting behaviors you do want. So we were talking about how awareness of the problems with your current behavior or the rewards of a new behavior, that's important. And just making the decision to make a change, it has to be important to you. And you have to have the tools to make this change. And I just wanted to point out how, for example, Alcoholics Anonymous works for people. So a lot of times people might be mandated to go to AA if, for example, they get a DUI or something like that. And they will go to this group and they might not think that maybe they belong there or they don't necessarily want to make changes. But a lot of times, even though AA doesn't really address the biochemical issues involved with having a substance use disorder, what it does is it has people make a self-inventory of some of the behaviors that they're doing and what makes you drink in the first place. And so it's really finding out what are those underlying feelings. So a lot of people drink for stress, right? So that's a really important concept that now they're going to come to this group of people that are all kind of there and they're all making this behavior change together and they're getting that support and they're getting some of that camaraderie. So it's really validating for people, it's really accepting, and it's really supportive. And so that's one of the main, that's basically how AA works so well. Another tool that we use when we're doing counseling with our students is this one here, and it's about taking control of cravings and urges. And we're going to go over this actual piece when we do our vignette, but it's a really nice thing because also looking at what people's obstacles may be. It might be, roommates might be obstacles to making any kind of behavior change, specifically like with substance use. If you're living with people who are habitually, drinking alcohol in, the evenings or whatever, it's much more easy to do that. And I know that, being proactive is so important. If you're able to say to your roommates, hey, I'm going to take a break. I know personally, I've got friends that are doing what they're calling a dry January, where they're not drinking this month. So, and they're telling me in advance, so I'm not going to invite them over for a drink, right? Socially distanced, of course, with my mask on. But anyway, there has to be a reward for long-term, well, for the short-term change and for the long-term change. So these rewards won't come quickly. It takes like incremental change. So want to talk a little bit about motivational interviewing. This is a really great tool that a lot of therapists will use to help people kind of look at how to collaborate with your client and make these goals around making changes. And it's about paying particular attention to the ambivalence that people may have and looking at the pros and cons of a behavior. So Miller and Rolnick are the people that developed this concept, and it does work quite well for behavior change. It's really looking at eliciting and exploring the person's own reasons for change within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. So I really like that one. And this is a diagram that shows kind of the different stages of change. So typically when someone's going to make a change, they're already into the contemplation stage at least, but pre-contemplation, a lot of times we will see students referred into the alcohol and drug program who, they're mandated to come in and they don't care about making any changes. It's more like they're just trying to, go through counseling to, appease the referral process. But, looking at pros and cons, you can kind of see, well, actually, yeah, maybe I should kind of cut back on some of these behaviors that are getting in the way of me doing as well as I can in school. So that's the contemplation stage. And then preparation is more of the stage where you're like, okay, during the weekdays, I've decided maybe I'm not going to have any alcohol or I'm not going to use any weed. And how are you going to do that? So, in counseling, we can really talk about ways to do that. And then the action phase is really just going ahead and doing what they say they're going to do. And that's when, really that change has been made. And then the maintenance stage, you got to kind of stay aware of what the goal is and stay on it, stay, really focused on it. And a lot of times it is very normal to go back to old patterns of behavior, and that's what might be called relapse. And then they'll kind of go back to like, maybe I should make that change again. So this is just a nice visual of this, and try to keep this in mind as we do our therapy. And some of the basic principles of motivational interviewing, expressing empathy. So really trying to understand where that person's coming from, just so that they feel like you're in it with them. Developing discrepancy. So for example, some students will say like, they don't really need 8 hours of sleep. And then we'll look at, okay, well, so how'd you do on that test that was at 8 in the morning? Oh, I didn't do so great because I stayed up really late studying and then I was stressed, so I couldn't sleep. So they realize, yes, they do really need that sleep. So looking at where they might not necessarily know how their behavior might not be fitting with what their goal is. Rolling with resistance, like I said before, they might not really, you never want to argue with somebody that you're trying to help make a change. So if they are insisting like, yeah, I really only need 6 hours of sleep, it's like, okay, so move on to the next, part of trying to help them discover the tools that they need. And then supporting self-efficacy, just saying like, I know you can do this. You've gotten an A in chemistry before. I know you can do it this time. What are some of the things that you need to do to make sure you do that again? And I know if you go to CLAS, it's going to be helpful and you're going to be able to do it. So another great acronym here is OARS. And this is asking open-ended questions when you're talking with somebody about their behavior change, using affirmations, having them come up with affirmations and supporting what they say. Reflective listening, what I hear you say is, and then you say just about the same thing that they just said. And then summaries. So you're kind of taking the whole picture of what they're telling you and kind of giving it back to them to make sure that you understand and to also reinforce, this goal that they have. And these are some questions that we ask students or people that we're helping to try to make behavior change. So where do you think you'd like to go from here? So that people can come up with the idea of like, oh, well, I think I would like to start setting my alarm for half an hour earlier so I can do that meditation, something like that. What might be a first step? Well, I'd like to, wean off my cannabis use by not doing it every day, something like that. What do you think would work best for you? So it's a very collaborative approach, and it's really, you're their cheerleader in a lot of ways.
So one of the great strategies of beginning this process, and if you're in my nutrition class, we have already begun this strategy, but I'm hoping that this will help enforce what we're already working toward. And we're using a format called SMART goals. And as you can see, SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And so each of these aspects will help to really not just define the goal, but also start to develop a plan to help you reach that goal. So when we're talking about a specific goal, is the goal clear? So not just something like, I want to lose weight or I want to get in shape, because that's pretty ambiguous. It can mean a lot of different things to different people. So we need to break that larger vision down into something that's very clear and specific. And that way we know what is it exactly that we want to accomplish. Another really important aspect of a SMART goal is a method of measurement. So can we have a before, during, and after? Can we track progress through this goal process? That's really, because it not only keeps you motivated, it also helps to really enlighten you on, is this working? Is this goal as clear or specific as I thought it was? Is it as attainable, right? Realistic for me during this time? So that relevance piece, is it relevant to my life? I mean, if it's a goal that you're setting that requires you to interact with large groups of people, and right now we're not able to do that in California, then it's not really relevant at this time, right? It's not realistic. So maybe we have to either alter the goal itself or put it off to a time where that is something that we're able to accomplish. And then when we talk about it being relevant, not only does it have to make sense in this time frame, but does it actually suit your specific interests, your abilities, and your needs? Right? So if we set a goal that really doesn't fit what we're interested in or what we're able to accomplish, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure. So really being able to break that down and be realistic. And well, maybe I can't run a marathon this year, but I bet you I could run a 10K, right? I've never run before. So setting a goal of running 26 miles versus 6 miles is probably a big difference in your ability to be successful. And then, of course, anytime we set a goal, we want to set a time frame. So what is your timeline? Are we starting the goal tomorrow? Is it a quarterly goal? So are we going to be done at the end of winter quarter? Is it an annual goal? I started it January 1st and plan to be done on December 31st. So really setting that deadline. And again, that goes back to keeping you on track, and we're measuring progress along the way. So all of these things are really, really important. Now, if your goal is large, right, and we're trying to make a big change, we have to try to break that down into much smaller, more attainable goals so that we are able to feel those small successes along the way, so we stay on track. So just remember, big change equates to small changes over time, right? So those small wins are so important. And we celebrate those small wins as we're working toward the larger change or behavior that we're trying to instill, because nothing happens overnight, whether it's a fitness or weight management goal or an academic goal or an addiction-based goal. We always have to break it down into small, attainable, measurable, and celebratory pieces that will keep us on track. And I'll show you a strategy or a worksheet that you can start to set your own SMART goal as we move through.
All right, so we are going to do a little vignette. What I'm going to do is stop the share so that we can both be on here. All right, so Amy, are you ready to do our vignette?
Yes, Whitney, thank you.
All right. All right, hi, Amy.
Hello, Whitney.
It's great to see you. Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too.
Sounds like you're looking to make some behavior changes.
Yes, I've been thinking, and since the year started, I've really been slipping back into some bad habits. And one thing I would really like to work on is my vaping habit.
All right. So it sounds like you want to cut back or quit vaping. Tell me some of the reasons for that.
Well, it really bothers me that every morning when I wake up, it's the first thing I think about, and it's the first thing I do in the morning. So I definitely don't like that. And then it costs money, and I'm a student, so I don't have a lot of money right now. And I know my parents would be really upset if they knew I was spending money on something like vaping that isn't really good for me. And then the other thing is, one of my goals this year is I want to run. I want to run a fast 10K. And I know that putting anything into my lungs is not going to help me reach that goal.
Okay. Wow. So you have some really important goals here, and the vaping just doesn't fit in with it at this point. Can you tell me a little bit about the last time you took a break from vaping or tried to quit?
Yes, well, I was able to go home over the break. And so when I go to my parents' house, I really can't vape there because they wouldn't like it. So I was forced to cut back. And at first it was hard because I did have my cravings, but then I realized even after just a couple days that I kind of forgot about it and I was filling my time doing other things and I felt so much better almost immediately. So
Awesome.
all I know is since I've been back, I fall back into my old habits.
Right. Okay. I totally get that. So it sounds like the change of scenery was really helpful for you. You had less stress, you had other activities that you were doing, and you were around people that didn't vape. And so you're really able to, and that shows that you do have the ability to really, take a break or quit the habit.
Yeah, I also know that, being back in school and, with money stress, so stressing out makes me also turn to vaping more. So that's another
Okay.
trigger for me.
Yeah, so you're really aware that stress will, be that trigger. And you want to make some changes to that by finding some good coping strategies for stress other than vaping. So, what do you think a good first step would be for you?
Well, I think cutting back is pretty realistic. I don't know if I can stop altogether right now, but maybe just saying like I wouldn't vape during the week would be a good start, or at least cutting back on the weekdays
Right.
might be a good place to start.
Do you know how many times you're vaping in a day?
Well, I'm not really sure, but it's about a pot a week and maybe like 20 times per day.
Okay. All right. So it's really good to know exactly how much you're getting into your system. About a pod is around, between 1 and 2 packs of cigarettes. So in order to really know, I'd like you to do some tracking. So what I can do is I can send you a tracking sheet and then you can really like write down exactly how much you're using.
Yeah, I think that would really help. And I didn't realize that it's like 2 packs of cigarettes per day. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a runner, you're definitely going to want to have healthy lungs. So that might be something to remember as you're cutting down, that you're doing something healthy for your body to make this change. And then, so once you get your baseline of exactly how much you're using, you can think about which vape sessions you want to cut out. And then you can kind of give up and reduce that, you know, 10 of those times per day.
Yeah, maybe cutting in half sounds like a good start. I think I could probably do that and then go from there.
Okay, great. And so when would be a good time to say that you're going to be completely quit?
Well, it's January, so probably by March. So by the end of the quarter, maybe.
Okay.
But then I'm really worried because during midterms and finals, it's going to be stressful. So how do I deal with that?
Yeah, good question. So what are some things that have worked for you in the past?
Well, I do have some friends that don't vape, and then I also have some friends in my classes. So maybe I could have study partners, and that would be supportive for my academics. So that might be something I can do.
Okay, great. And I think, if you are around friends who do vape, you might let them know that you're taking a break right now and not to offer it to you.
That's true. Yeah, I will let my friends know. Maybe they can support me through my goal of slowing down and eventually quitting.
I also have a handout that I could show you. Would you like to take a look at it?
Sure.
All right, so let me go to my screen here and try to find it. Sorry. Um, sorry, I didn't have it
Okay.
pulled up, I guess. Sorry. Okay, that one didn't work. Okay. Share screen. I'm gonna have to make this smaller. This is not working.
That's okay.
All right.
We could just talk about it. So you were
here.
there.
Okay. There we go. Do you see it?
I do see it.
Okay, great. So just some of the strategies as far as cutting down, and this is for cigarettes, but it's similar. One tactic is to delay. So if you're feeling a craving for nicotine, wait it out. You could set a timer for yourself, a 10-minute timer, and just go outside and maybe, you know, you love yoga, so do some yoga stretches instead. You could distract yourself. That could be, you know, watch a little YouTube video or like walk your dog, something like that, where you're trying to not think about it. Deep breaths, so even a meditation could be nice there. Drinking water, having something right by you, so planning ahead to have like that good glass of water the way you like it with the ice or whatever. And then reminding yourself, going over the reasons for why you're quitting, and refusals. So it's not that you can't smoke, it's that you're choosing not to smoke. You have that control. So understanding your urges, I think just always knowing like what's underneath it, like it's normal to have those cravings, but really it's probably because of stress too. And then really if you want to just delve into like, what are these urges? How often are they coming? How strong are they? You could rate them 1 to 10. Right now it's feeling like a 7. How long are those cravings lasting? Maybe only like 20 seconds. And then just like, you know, planning the strategies like we said before. So having some affirmations like I'm healthy, I'm a runner, I love yoga, whatever those things are that make you see yourself as this healthy person rather than somebody who's kind of powerless over nicotine. So, and just, you know, being kind to yourself and patient, because it does take time to, you know, cut down or quit a nicotine habit.
That makes sense.
Cool. Well, I'll
this
send
is
that
really
one to you.
helpful.
Great. I mean, I think, you know, you've definitely got control over this. And I think with just the planning ahead and reminding, so just getting that piece of paper out sometimes, even if you're having an urge and you read the paper, that can be another way to distract yourself from the actual urge that you're feeling physiologically. So anything else that you want to talk about?
No, I think this was my main concern today, and you've given me some great strategies and I've, you know, things to think about, and so I feel pretty good and that I can start working on my goal.
Okay, very good. Well, let's follow up next week. Does that work for you?
It does. I look forward to it.
Great. Let's look at our schedules.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll go back to this and we will go to present and
back up.
There we go. Okay. Thank
you. So I want to just, you know, reinforce the fact that the motivational interviewing, so the example that we just walked through, it can work in a variety of different scenarios. And so examples of different behavioral health topics include weight management or healthy eating. Of course, you just saw a substance use example, sleep, which Whitney has referred to a few times already, device management that we talked about in the very beginning, things, you know, meditation and making that more of a regular practice, and then fitness goals as well. And so in the health coaching program, and I'll talk a little bit about it at the end of our session here, we utilize this exact same strategy, even though it was developed for more of substance use and abuse. We use the exact same strategy for health management type goals. And so it works just as well. So one of the major things I think people tend to set as goals are weight management. And I say weight management instead of weight loss because, you know, a lot of times people are looking more to alter their body composition. And when I say that, I mean, you know, maybe burning or losing fat weight while maintaining or building lean body mass. So that would include muscle tissue. So it's not always based on just scale weight. And that's funny to say that because there's a scale on this image, but one of the aspects of maintaining a healthy body weight and weight management is energy balance. And I actually really like this because it shows you the energy intake and the aspects which the protein, carbohydrate, and fat are macronutrients or substrates that provide energy for our body, or how we call it calories, right? Versus our energy output. So on that side, we're seeing basal metabolism, or people sometimes just refer to it as my metabolism, the amount of physical activity that you're conducting on a daily or weekly basis. And then the TEF, or thermic effective food, which is the amount of energy that we expend when we consume food. So we can count that into our output. So if we can somehow balance that out so that our intake isn't way overwhelming the output, we'll be able to maintain a healthy body weight. And then of course, if your goal is weight loss, fat loss, then we're gonna wanna kind of off scale this a little bit and have the output slightly increase over our intake so that we have what we call a negative energy balance. And one method of starting to monitor your food intake, I know a lot of people use like calorie counters or weighing your food and all of this stuff. And all of that's very time consuming. And I've found through my practice and my teaching that people usually give up on that just because it's so time consuming and overwhelming. This MyPlate design, and you can go to the website, choosemyplate.gov, which is presented by the United States Department of Agriculture, allows us to just design our meals based on this plate, right? So we have the plate sectioned out into our different food groups: fruits, grains, vegetables, proteins. We have a sidecar, I call it, of dairy. Not saying you have to include dairy, but that's definitely an option if we're trying to include things like calcium, vitamin D. Of course, it does have fat and carbohydrate and protein in it as well. So it does include many nutrients. You can just arrange your plate in this manner, like if you're in the dining commons, hopefully soon, and you don't want to worry about having to measure or count calories. Just take a normal sized plate, arrange it in this manner, and then you can assure that you are consuming a balanced, adequate, and varied diet, which is really essential when we're trying to maintain a healthy diet, whether or not our goal is fat loss or muscle gain. We still want to include all of our important nutrients. In terms of macronutrient or substrate breakdown, you can see on the right-hand side, carbohydrates should make up the bulk of our caloric intake. And I know there's a lot of kind of information, good and bad, out there that kind of talks about, oh, low carb diets, etc. And this slide and this research shows that we do need to be consuming most of our calories from carbohydrates because it's our body's preferred source of energy. So every single cell in your body really relies on carbohydrate as a fuel. The brain really primarily, almost exclusively, uses carbohydrate for functioning, and it really hoards a lot of that energy. So your brain activity relies on that, and that's why that is so high. And then we have kind of an almost even split between fat and protein calories. And again, if you arrange your plate like it shows on the left, we can almost assure that we are kind of balancing that out. So again, it goes deeper down just in our calories in, calories out. We also need to ensure that we're getting the nutrients we need on a daily basis. And I know there are many ways that we can track this. So we do have food tracking abilities. In my nutrition classes, we use what's called Nutrition Calc Plus. It's integrated into the course. And so my students spend time tracking their food, and it allows you to develop data and reports that show the breakdown of all the nutrients. But I know that apps out there as well that work the same way. So I encourage some sort of tracking, but avoiding the really detailed calorie counting, and instead making it more user friendly. When we are talking about energy in, which was in the MyPlate slide, we also need to balance that out with our energy out. So even though the largest energy out piece was our basal metabolism, right? And that basically refers to all of the cellular activity that occurs in your body on a given day. And so anything from your brain activity to digestion to breathing to movement, right? All of that is included in your measurable BMR or basal metabolic rate. The next largest expenditure of energy is in our activity or activities of daily living. We call them ADLs. And so I like this slide because it shows a pyramid of ADLs, and you can kind of see the base of what we should be focusing on is just those basic movements that we require our bodies to do every single day. And we should be moving around, I would say, every day for at least 30 minutes. And it doesn't mean that you're doing burpees and jumping jacks. That means that we're walking from, building to building. This is in our, in our ideal world when we're back on campus. We're walking around instead of driving, right? Even riding your bike, that would be considered an ADL if you're just using it for transportation. Housework, mowing the lawn, mopping the floor, that's considered an ADL. Walking your dog. So things that you include in just your daily living, right? So the more we can be upright on our feet, ambulatory is what we call it, the more calories we're going to be expending for those ADLs. And then on top of that, we do want to include what we call planned exercise. So you can see it's broken into three components. We have what's called aerobic exercise or vascular, where we're using oxygen as an energy, and we're getting our heart rate up, right? So cardiovascular means that it's including your heart and your blood vessels, being oxygen and other fuel sources through your blood to the cells of your body, the working cells of the body. So anything, joy is a good form of aerobic exercise. We could be running, biking, playing a sport, right? That would work. Anything that gets your heart rate up and sustains it for that, about 30 minutes. And we're looking for about 150 total minutes per week. Okay. Flexibility exercises. So we call that flexibility or mobility. We're keeping our joints mobile by maintaining the elasticity in our muscles and connective tissues. So you can see the image of the female stretching and holding that stretch for about 10 to 30 seconds so that we're kind of creating a more permanent change in muscle length and connective tissue length. And then we also have strength exercise, which we should be performing 2 to 3 days per week. Now, the thing about this image that I'm not necessarily a fan of is you don't have to be lifting heavy weights to achieve benefit from strength training. You can use your own body weight, right? So if we're stuck at home right now and you have the ability to drop down and do push-ups or body weight squats or anything like that, it's honestly just as good. It's considered resistance training as well. The goal would be to try to hit all the major muscle groups of the body at some point during the week. So 2 to 3 days per week of this type of exercise is going to keep that lean body mass we talked about, maintain it and even build upon it. And that will help support your BMR, which is always higher if you have more muscle tissue. And then on top of that, we have our lighter recreational activities. So anything like, walking, and I know many of you put yoga in the chat as some self-care, which is wonderful. And so we can throw that into our light recreational activity. So maybe we're not getting our heart rate up super high, but it's still planned movement, okay? And then on top of that, we do allow for sedentary activities. So it's okay to have downtime. You definitely need to incorporate that into your lifestyle. So anything from watching TV or social media time or video games, anything like that, talking on the phone. And I know a lot of this is including some of our digital devices, but that's okay. We can definitely incorporate that in. The problem right now with staying at home is we're not getting our ADLs, which should be the base of all of our daily expenditure. And we're spending way too much on the sedentary. So you have to be a little bit more purposeful right now to get up and walk around the block a couple times a day or something of that nature.
So
other topics, go ahead.
We do have other suggestions on some of these other topics as well. And because I am employed as a behavioral health professional in the alcohol and drug program, substance use is the thing that we are talking with students about all the time. And some of the basics are, setting a limit before you go out to drink, knowing that you got to eat something before you have alcohol. With other substances, it's really looking at, what are the negative effects to some of these substances, and, what are the reasons you're using these things, and if there's other ways to handle, if you are using them for emotional reasons, let's look at other other ways that you can cope with some of those feelings. And then with sleep, but we've had some experts come into student health and talk about one of the most important things about it is having the same time you get up every day. So if 8 a.m. is the best time for you to get up and get your day going, just try to do that all the time. So that might mean going to bed, making sure you get to sleep before 12 o'clock so that you can get a good night's sleep, but getting up at the same time every day and exposing yourself to light in the morning when you first wake up can kind of wake your body up. Sometimes you need to set an alarm to go to bed at night to make sure that you're going to bed and not just scrolling through, your social media. Device management. I think some of those app limits on our devices are helpful for us, just so that we know like how many hours that we've actually been on our devices. So setting a timer with that can be helpful. Like, hey, I've been Snapchatting my friend for half an hour now. Wow, that's a long time. So when you're aware, you can kind of, make sure that you're able to limit it. And then meditation, building it into your routine. So maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you are able to, at noontime, every single time after you eat your lunch, you do a meditation, something like that, so that it becomes that routine. And they say that establishing routines is almost like you're folding a piece of paper over and over so that those creases become really that's an automatic fold now for you. So also looking at the UCSB Health and Wellness has meditations that you can do live. So it's a good one to do. And with fitness, having a partner, an accountability partner, can be really important. Having that person text you, hey, it's Friday at noon, we always do our run, see you out on the lawn, that can keep you accountable. So I would say, find what works for you and have other people come on board, as far as, hopefully they're in your pod right now and you can wear your mask if you need to. But I think we can take some questions at the end too after this.
So if you are interested in starting your SMART goal planning, this is a great beginning worksheet just to kind of ask the right questions and put some thoughts together. And although we probably won't have time for each person to work through it today, if you email myself or Whitney, we'll be happy to send this out to anybody that's interested in utilizing it. But it's really helpful in starting to create your goal, define it, and then start that planning process with some of the strategies that we're talking about today. There's many different ways we can accomplish that. So I encourage everybody to do that. As we're setting goals, and I think Whitney, touched upon this, sometimes there's a back pedal, right? A little slip backwards, and that's okay. I mean, we don't beat ourselves up, we don't give up. Instead, we can always revisit and revamp our goals and maybe make them more realistic or more attainable, maybe adjust the timelines if something comes up, because life happens, as we all know very well now. It's okay to readjust and revisit all the time. One of the things I wanted to touch upon is a keystone habit. So a keystone habit is something general and large that you can start to initiate in your life that lead toward maybe smaller but more permanent behavior change. So if you were inspired by any of the information I shared, like with the nutrition facts, and you're like, wow, I really want to start using that MyPlate, I think that's a good way for me to start to adjust or plan or create my meals. That would be considered a keystone habit. I'm going to use the MyPlate, right? So that's a huge change in how you serve yourself a meal. So once you start doing that, it's going to kind of force you into, wow, now I'm including more vegetables into my life. That was something I wanted to do. Or, you know, maybe I'm really balancing out those macronutrients into the right percentage ranges that I'm supposed to do for my own energy and nutrition and intake. So large keystone habits that break down into the smaller ones that, you know, are really meaningful. And quite honestly, you know, we're trying to make a permanent behavior change to lead toward a more healthy lifestyle. So whatever that is, you know, and Whitney gave a lot of different examples, you know, even the meditation, the sleep, all those things are important. So set a large habit change that leads towards are really important wins, basically, and goals. And then keep trying. As I mentioned before, you know, it's okay to not succeed the first time through. Find that during your measurement progress that it's not going as quickly as you had hoped. And so keep trying, try a new strategy, things like that. And just remember that the large change will come. We have to really celebrate those small changes over time. That will eventually lead toward that permanent, larger adjustment. And I just wanted to revisit, I mentioned to you guys that UC Santa Barbara, we have the health coach certificate program through the Exercise and Sport Studies department. I gave you the URL for our website, ess.ucsb.edu. And we run this health coach program through the Wellness and Fitness Institute. So it allows students to actually learn how to implement the strategies that Whitney and I both introduced to you today, so that you can either use them to help, you know, set and reach your goals, but even further than that, start to help others. And that's part of the field of health and wellness that's really growing. And obviously right now we're going to need a lot of support in kind of re-looking at health and well-being as we move forward this year into hopefully a different environment, and, you know, readjusting our habits, because we had to very quickly last year, and now we need to kind of shift back into some different habits that will lead toward good health and well-being.
I wanted to share some of these campus resources. The Rec Cen is still a great opportunity for people to work out. You can sign up for those on Shoreline. Of course, ESS classes like Amy teaches. Coming into student health and meeting with either a therapist in an alcohol and drug program or one of the social workers. We do have on-call therapists, so, you know, feel free to touch base with somebody during work hours. CAPS obviously is a great resource for students. EOP, CLAS, career services, the basic needs program. All these are just, are really helpful for students. So I would say, you know, if you go anywhere, you're going to get, you might have landed somewhere that you thought you didn't know what you needed, but you'll end up where you need to go eventually, because we all are intertwined. So just know that my program, counseling, education, prevention, and recovery, those are the main tenets of it. And we are working from telehealth right now, and we're looking forward to coming back to campus, but not quite doing that yet.
Hopefully soon. So we'd love to hear from you. Any questions you have or feedback, or if you have questions about some of the resources we've shared and you want you know, contact information, start here with us. Go ahead and jot down our emails. We're happy to talk with you and share with you. Remember, I'm happy to share this SMART goal worksheet and any of the other worksheets you saw on our webinar today. We're very happy to share with you any resources we have.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. The last slide we have here is just some of the references that we used. So if you are interested in reading more, check those out. And there's just tons of information that you'll find in these websites and books. So thanks.
We appreciate all of you coming today and taking the time out. I know it's a busy week, so we appreciate all of your attendance and hope that you have some takeaways now to start reaching your goals.
All right.